Hi everyone, welcome to the Celebrity Diaries. George Edward Lopez, brought into the world on April 23, 1961, in Los Angeles, has had an existence loaded with chuckling difficulty and debate brought up in the Mission Slopes suburb by his maternal grandpa and step-granddad. Lopez rose up out of a provoking childhood to turn into an unmistakable figure in the realm of parody. Regardless of giving pleasure to incalculable fans, his process has been set apart by minutes that mix both giggling and outrage. His profession in satire took off, procuring him distinction for his humor that reverberated with crowds in 2020. In the midst of the public discourse on racial and social issues, George Lopez openly upheld the people of color matter development anyway. His position confronted analysis from some inside the Latino people group, who addressed supporting a reason that didn't appear to respond to support for their own battles. Lopez undauntedly stressed the significance of making the wisest decision without expecting anything consequently. George Lopez has been no more odd to debate with past explanations. Re-emerging to fuel analysis, a striking occurrence happened when he confronted reactions to remarks made before in his vocation that were seen as making jokes to the detriment of African-American individuals. The debate brought up issues about his genuineness in supporting racial balance. Same year, 2012, George Lopez wound up entangled in another contention when he answered an affirmed $80 million abundance on then-President Donald Trump's head by an Iranian official. George answered to an Instagram post with "Well, do it for half," despite the fact that George's delegates said it was only a tad jokey joke. The reaction was quick, and enraged preservationists and Trump allies showed up in large numbers, calling George wiped out a savage maniac and a deadbeat darn kind, as per the rap talk. Development has picked up speed, powered by people communicating a longing to see George face legitimate ramifications for his assertions. The development immediately took root on Twitter, with clients utilizing web-based labeling conspicuous associations like the FBI, CIA, and, surprisingly, then-President Trump himself. Trump's organization definitely heard the calls, and the mystery administration really pulled up on George, as per Individuals magazine. George's experience with the mystery administration was no happenstance. The entertainer, known for his sharp mind, purportedly told government specialists during the gathering that "you accepted it as a danger. I accepted it as a gauge anyway." This remark didn't cause giggling from the mystery administration, who considered the circumstance not the slightest bit entertaining in spite of the seriousness of the internet-based reaction and the ensuing mystery administration examination. The experience with bureaucratic specialists brought about no proper charges or lawful ramifications for George. Anyway, the contention didn't keep the comic from keeping up with his position. George stayed proud and, surprisingly, multiplied down on his analysis of the then-president, calling Trump's 2020 Netflix unique. "We'll do it in half." Beginning around 2012, a warmed dramatization has unfolded between comic George and previous AOPA Province Sheriff Joe Oreo. The flash that touched off this quarrel can be followed back to George's comedic hits at Joe's enemy of migration position during different parody specials. What started as apparently innocuous humor before long swelled into a public conflict, including news discharge meetings and, surprisingly, a test for an eye-to-eye meeting, as per reports from Focal. George designated Joe in his satire specials, making him the subject of jokes because of his dubious enemy of movement position. This decision of comedic material set up a conflict between the comic and the previous sheriff, adding a startling layer to the public talk on migration because of George's comedic punches. Sheriff Joe Oreo didn't keep down. He terminated back with a news discharge in various meetings, incorporating one with a BC where he communicated his dismay with being the objective of George's jokes. Joe clarified that he was prepared to confront George in person, provoking him to nut, assuming you buck, and trying to come down to Arizona for an eye-to-eye meeting in a strong move. Joe scrutinized George's boldness, encouraging him to defy what is happening head-on. The quarrel took an intriguing turn when Joe guaranteed on Twitter that George wouldn't meet with him. This brought up issues about whether George was keeping away from a head-on showdown with Joe, or then again, in the event that the previous sheriff had become superfluous to him. In a tweet, Joe suggested that George's hesitance to meet eye-to-eye proposed an absence of fortitude on George's section. The quarrel that picked up speed in 2019 involved comic George Lopez in a Twitter trade with a client named Joe. The question established in political contrasts started when Joe restored a video from 2016 highlighting George Lopez communicating his perspectives on movement to TMZ. In the video, Lopez intensely expressed that if Trump somehow happened to win the political decision, he would readily leave the nation, expressing great "I'll return." Joe took advantage of the chance to uncover this assertion, labeling George in a post and adding a snide comment. "Gracious, I thought you were leaving." This underlying cooperation established the groundwork for a virtual entertainment encounter that would before long gush out over to different stages unfit to oppose further commitment. Joe extended the landmark to Instagram, where he posted a message censuring Lopez, declaring that Lopez is brimming with trash and ought to stay faithful to his obligation and return to his country. The post grabbed the eye of Joe's devotees, who repeated his feelings as well as strengthened the analysis by marking George Lopez as a hooligan. They additionally called him a bonehead, a chicken, and a failure in the time of web-based entertainment where sentiments are communicated at the touch of a console. A bizarre episode happened in October 2018, as per the story. George turned into the objective of aggression online, a casualty of the surge of analysis that online entertainment stages can cause in some cases to recreate this computerized attack finished when in an unforeseen new development. George found himself confounded by a vocal Trump ally during a visit to a Hooters office. Observes detailed that Trump's allies, intensely propelled by his political loyalty, went through the day insulting George with mottos, for example, "Making America Extraordinary Again." Strains raised, and George, obviously tired of the consistent commendation, allegedly assumed control over issues as per TMZ, a well-known superstar media source. George connected and got the Trump ally by the rear of his head. The occurrence occurred in broad daylight spaces, raising worries about the slim line between online manner of speaking and certifiable showdowns, provoked by the Hooters struggle policing involved the day after the occurrence. Cops talked with George to get his side of the story. He was subsequently accused of wrongdoing. Attack the legitimate results of the squabble that happened. Shockingly, the story veered off in a strange direction when the Trump ally, the supposed casualty for this situation, didn't show up in court. This inability to hear prompted the excusal of charges against George in December 2018. Out of 2017, a cause occasion for adolescent diabetes veered off in a strange direction when comic George made that big appearance. The occasion went to by compelling figures who had liberally given to the reason turned into the scenery for an off-kilter conflict among humor and governmental issues. George started his set with hostile to best jokes evoking distress among a portion of the fat cats present. One eminent contributor, who had contributed $250,000 to the foundation, purportedly moved toward George mentioning him to restrain the politically charged content. Anyway, the comic went on with his Trump-related humor in spite of being exhorted. In any case, the environment in the room turned tense as the group started booing George for his disputable comments. Perceiving the crowd's dismay, the comic at last apologized for infusing governmental issues into what should be a carefree foundation occasion. Trying to ease up the temperament, he added, "So I am sorry to your white honor anyway." The conciliatory sentiment appeared to be lacking as a tweet from a participant uncovered that George's utilization of obscenity and steady Trump jokes had worn ragged on the crowd in light of the developing disappointment. Occasion coordinators purportedly accompanied George out of the gala in September 2017. Comic George ended up in steaming hot water after an online entertainment post that recommended expelling cops rather than unlawful migrants planning to make the roads more secure, as revealed by Fox News. In spite of the fact that George later erased the remark, the repercussions were quick, with moderate news sources reprimanding him for what they considered untrustworthy comments. This occurrence mirrors the exemplary conflict between Hollywood characters and the domain of serious political talk, which transformed what began as an apparently terrible joke into an undeniable discussion. George's endeavor at humor slammed into the elevated pressures encompassing police shootings, which had acquired huge consideration all through the year. Communicating his anxiety about the flood of viciousness against policing confronted reactions from disheartened web-based clients who asked him to avoid political conversations and spotlight his comedic gifts regardless of the analysis. George, in a meeting with NPR, held fast, expressing that while he upholds policing, it's not guaranteed to embrace each individual official. Unashamed, he would not withdraw or apologize for his assertions in the February 2017 comic. Thanks for watching this video.